revenge narrative with Spencer Dinwiddie up in the air tonight?
Man, he was going off yesterday.
He was. He was one of the few ones we hit. I'm with DFS, man. That dude is just disappointing. Welcome in. It is a Thursday. It's a busy Thursday. We have some new news that happened in the last hour and a half or so that will fold into what we're doing on this NBA slate tonight for No House Advantage. So it's the NHA Strategy Show. Gundacker's in the house. I'm Eytan, Mike's producing, and the three of us here with you for the next 30 minutes or so. We appreciate you hitting the thumbs up button, subscribing if you haven't already. If you want to freeload for about 29 minutes, at least hit those on the way out. And do yourself and us a favor, right? We don't ask it right at the beginning, but maybe throughout. And you can match your first deposit at No House Advantage. I'll remind you throughout. Don't worry, Stokastic, and then you go from there. We'll match your first deposit up to 50. We were just talking about this, man, before the show. You and I have done plenty of shows together, but this is the first NHA show that we've done, and we're in the NBA streets tonight.
Yeah,
I was trying to set you up for a for that.
I mean, yeah, these are the intro. Yeah, NHA is becoming a regular show for us lately, and I think we're starting to see our viewer and the player base grow a little bit. So that's good to see, because really fun site to be different. You want a breath of fresh air versus the daily grind that we're used to. It's a good change of pace.
So we talk, all of us, no matter if it's the NFL, the NBA shows, we talk about the overlay. That's clearly a huge element, appeal, if you will. Strategy-wise, though, and you kind of hinted at that because you approach everything with your own strategies, depending on if it's for, a DK slate or if you're looking at taking a break and doing something here on NHA. Is there anything overall in the NBA that, and again, it could be a 3-game slate, could be a 13-game slate, but something that kind of differs at NHA that you normally do as opposed to just in general when we talk DFS shows?
I mean, I think the main difference is the lines are static. They don't adjust to the news, and there's no sport with more late breaking news than the NBA to take advantage of. And a line that they post last night typically becomes very inefficient by the time lock comes around. And every day when we're looking at our free tools at Stokastic, we're seeing 80 to 90% probabilities on one way or the other. So it's just if it's a little soft in that regard. So even though it may seem like a menacing 10 pick parlay, it's really not, because there's a couple free squares. So just take advantage of the news, and that's the main difference. If the news drops, every other site, their lines are adjusting on the spot. They're yanking stuff off the board to make a more efficient line, but we don't have to worry about that over here. So I like that. It is a change of pace, a little ode to how it used to be, where everything didn't react to the news like it does now. It feels so sharp.
Yeah, I can't even remember those days. It's so watered down now. All right, well, look, Damian Lillard is out. We know that. It's 3:40 in the East Coast here where I am. And that news popped 2 hours ago, I think. And as you mentioned, and just as a reminder to everybody out there who's watching this, you're not going to get by on the field by sneaking in under for Dame. He's out, meaning you're going to lose points. You'll lose whatever you would. Same thing with Bradley Beal. Same thing with anybody that has an O next to their name. But as you mentioned, nothing changes around Damian Lillard. And that's where I think there's going to be an opportunity for you that you've already looked at, I'm sure, right? Where you can sneak in and attack some value here on the Blazers side.
Yeah, Blazers still could limp into this ball game. Last night we saw Jeremy Grant and Yusuf Nurkic down. So if those guys can't go today, and they're officially questionable, so they might be able to go, that would change things up a little bit. If they can't go, then it's the Anthony Simons show. We got a little taste of that last year, so I would definitely be interested in looking at his stuff. Yesterday, as soon as Jeremy Grant and Nurkic were ruled out, I jumped on Josh Hart rebounds, because that's what he does. And I mean, if you're into revenge narratives, he did used to wear the uniform on the opposing team tonight too. So that's what I've been looking for. So there's still news to be had in this Portland stuff, but Dame being out is huge, and that's a good start to pushing us towards Anthony Simons point props. And that's actually one of our top props today on the No House Advantage free tool over a Stokastic, they have his point prop at 16.5. That line was live with Damian Lillard.
Yep.
Now you take out Dame. We're giving that a almost 83% chance probability of hitting the over. The Stokastic projections like him for over 22 real points. So a 6-point gap there, and that could go even further forward if guys like Grant and Nurkic are out. So yeah, Dame out, jamming Simons over points.
Absolutely. I think if you're building, you mentioned those are up there. We have these available for you, our NBA projections, and Mike's going to flash back and forth from that. We also have the optimal lineup where it's essentially just plug and play throughout. If you really just want to be told what to do, then you can do that. But it's also good to kind of listen to how Gun's breaking this down, because you'll see how a lot of this will correlate to what you're playing on NHA versus just a typical slate. So point being that if you're running multiple lineups here, you mentioned the points at 16.5. It's hard for me to think that minus Damian Lillard and maybe Jeremy Grant, but even with him on the floor, that Anthony Simons doesn't hit 3 threes tonight. So that 2.5 line was probably baked in earlier with Lillard hogging all the shots. 2.5 threes, I think, would also be a pretty comfortable over for you.
Yeah, you feel like that's how, a big way for him to get to that point prop would be to chuck some threes, especially considering that no matter what, they're going to go in this game a sizable dog. And that's a game script for chucking more threes. So I wouldn't push back on that at all.
I love, man, that Simon's mode is great. I mean, it's like video game mode, right? There's nobody else on the floor that's going to take shots away from him. This cat could easily launch 12 or 13 threes tonight. Make 4, I get it, but launch 13, 14 threes, and you wouldn't be shocked.
No, that's kind of his game.
Yep. What about on the other side of that? Again, this is also baked in, and it's not to the extent of that Damian Lillard will be a defensive machine, shutting every single person down left and right, but it can be also, as you mentioned, taking advantage of either a blowout or simply getting to that blowout. CJ McCollum, I mean, everybody on the Pelicans last night was over. I don't know if anybody, maybe Ingram was the lone guy to knock a 3 down, right? Like everybody was atrocious. So you would think that CJ McCollum, right, would stand maybe the best chance of bouncing back, but pretty much anybody here. Just curious to see how you look at A, New Orleans bouncing back, and B, against an opponent now without Damian Lillard.
Yeah, I was in the DFS streets with Zion Williamson last night. It was not a fun experience. And nothing's out there yet, but on a back-to-back where you got a big spread, I'd be curious to see if they opt for an opportunity to maybe go light on some guys. I wasn't thinking that I was going to get to any Pelicans props unless there was news to come out, because this is a team that essentially has a big 3, arguably a big 4, and they can vulture each other every night. And I think the lines for them are going to be more efficient than not if they're all healthy. So I tend to stay away from them in the prop streets and really the DFS streets as well, unless we get some guys out. If I had to lean on somebody, Brandon Ingram's usually the guy I got leading the charge in like usage and points per minute. Same with Zion. It was Zion in points per minute, but sometimes his minutes aren't as healthy as you would want them to be. So I think generally speaking right now, I'd probably pre-light on them overall, unless some more news developed that would kind of change that.
Is there one area that if news does come down, or just anything overall, like Zion rebounds or Ingram assists, is there one area that you would target specifically if there is a play whatsoever?
So if Portland's without Grant and Nurkic again, yesterday we saw that create a more depleted front court. And again, guys like Josh Hart in that front court, maybe we'd be looking at rebounds for a Zion and J-Val. I would probably want like Larry Nance to be out again for me to feel a little bit more confident about that, but they still have a deep enough rotation and a lopsided enough spread that can get you there. At the same time, if Jeremy Grant and Nurkic are in, I'm not gonna just rule out the Blazers just yet, because even without Damian Lillard, we saw them play some decent enough basketball. They went into Phoenix and beat the Suns. They beat the Suns twice this year, and that last one was without Dame. So I wouldn't rule them out to keep it competitive, but I would want I would want some more news. No house advantage. I tend to really base a lot of my picks on news and opportunity versus grabbing an efficient line that I can grab somewhere else 1-to-1.
All right, what's looking so sweet and juicy for you? Like when you look, and we have a couple of unders that are pretty strong here. Maxi Kleber, Dwight Powell, their PRAs are pretty high, 90 percentile. We also had a couple of overs beyond Anthony Simons, like PJ Washington, straight up points. Also think you can launch as many threes as you like against Miami, at least so far in this early part of the season. Speaking of threes, Tobias Harris, and you also mentioned that revenge narrative up in the air could be here with Dinwiddie in that earlier game with the Mavs and Wizards. So where would you what jumped out at you, number one overall, that we may have not talked about yet?
Well, PJ Tucker under. We actually give him 100% probability of hitting the under of 21.5 PRA. 100% is crazy, right? Maybe it should be 99.9 because it's
100, right?
It's 100%. 21.5 PRA. I feel like if we took the under on that for PJ Tucker the last 3 years and just kept rolling it over, we'd be pretty rich. Our projections have PJ Tucker at like 11. They have him at 21.5. He's very much not involved in the peripheral accumulation of of basketball. Is more just out there as a solid 3-and-D guy. So I like the under quite a bit, and you can't beat 100% probability.
Yeah, one thing I really like about that is I don't have to worry about points from him at all, because the guy who is there to get him a bucket or two is out. Tyrese Maxey isn't interested in making sure that PJ Tucker gets a bucket. If anything, Tyrese Maxey's more interested in himself, which I love, getting a bucket. So, yeah, I think this would correlate to where you would really just need a bunch of rebounds, and then you're sitting there sweating out assists. I'm with you. With our projections, you referenced that as well. There is no Harden, though, tonight. Does that do anything with you at all with Maxey? He doesn't pop pretty high like the other guys mentioned. If anything, in Tobias Harris, his over threes there. But I was just curious if the absence of James Harden, if you did anything with that. That's not new, of course. We knew that was coming in.
Usually Maxey's the peak of my interest there. We know Embiid's usage is going to be well above 35% in that split. But so far this season, Maxey has touched 31% on the usage. And him and Embiid are going to be looked at to do a lot of the scoring. So I would be looking for some on Maxey, but like you said, this isn't game one of no Harden, so the Lions have had an opportunity to become more efficient. Maxey PRA line on no house advantage was 29.5. We do project them for the over like 32.5, but that's not as staggering of a difference as we have some at the top of the list. So that line's only getting a 66% probability of hitting the over, but that's still better than way better than coin flip odds, which is still, we're taking these 80%ers for granted. But when we're betting props 1-to-1 on sports books, a lot of times a coin flip odd is a blessing. So getting 66% is really, really good. And then we have him at a 72% chance of hitting the over of his 19.5 point prop, which is static over there. So I would probably look at the Maxey points with the Harden absence with an opportunity to still get there.
So speaking of Maxey, different spelling and first name, of course, but Kleber and Powell were two other guys below Tucker. I must have just glanced over the Tucker thing, because every now and again we have projections that aren't quite up to the very second. And I guess I just thought, well, 100%. But yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, 10 points, if not a little bit higher there. You're going to get a similar gap, not the same gap as far as it not being 100%, but this also. And Kleber and even Larry Nance, I think you can play, according to our projections on Stokastic, a couple of times if it's the PRA or simply going under their rebounds. Are you looking at those simply because we have about 10, maybe 11 that are still in that 90 percentile gun before we actually get to anything in the 80s? And I say that because that's where the 80s start, is with Anthony Simons up at the top. So if you were building, you may just want to build a lot of unders tonight.
Yeah, I mean, probability is probability. I know the unders aren't as fun, but money's fun, and I like 80 to 90% probabilities. And yeah, Maxi Kleber, with Christian Wood out, they're looking at Claybaugh, Dwight Powell, Javal McGee, those type of guys to fill in the front court. But Claybaugh is kind of PJ Tucker-esque, where he can get you some blocks and fill a role as needed, but he's not going to be that heavily involved more often than not. So at a 21.5 PRA line, much like PJ Tucker, right there on the under as well. Very, very similar. Claybaugh is somebody that he'll get you some blocks and steals, but that's not going to impact this line. So I'll take the under there as well.
Love that, man. And you're right. You definitely have an opportunity to target a lot. It's not sexy, but it cashes by all means. I am curious, and maybe we look at this from an under standpoint and an over standpoint, because I'm putting you on the spot. So I'll give you time. I'll kind of talk through it here. But when you look at stuff that we have projected on Stokastic, and again, the projections are there on NHA, the optimal lineups are there for you for NHA. If you're just popping in here because you know who Gundacker is and you saw, wait a second, he's doing this show, NHA, let me check this out, and you have no idea what's going on, well, we're going to walk you through this, and we'll even give you a deposit match up to $50. Your first deposit, all you need to do is put in Stokastic. So it's a very simple process of us getting you there, and even a bankroll, and then you see everything out there. Is there something that jumps out, maybe one that jumps out on an under and an over, that you think would be the best contrarian play? And not necessarily contrarian in life, but, the assumption that a lot of people are going with our projections, and you're thinking, all right, well, yeah, I get it. Like, I love PJ Washington clipping that 10.5 points. But if I'm building a contrarian lineup to what we have, maybe that's the one you go with. Is there an over maybe or an under that jump out that you think would be the strongest contrarian plays to what we have projected?
Ooh, man, contrarian. So like a 60%?
No. It could be, honestly, it doesn't have to be a certain percentile. Again, like, let's just look at PJ Washington or Tobias Harris. Right. Mm-hmm. And we have that as a strong projection at 79.7%. So pardon me, the majority of the field here that's following our projections say, hey, that's a hell of a play. I'm going to put that up there at 7 points. You may look at that and say, look, I get it. I understand the projection. I get how it evens out from 1.5 to 2.53. But if I'm building a lineup to fade what I think to be our projections, where I think a lot of people are going to go, I would go under the Tobias. So that's what I'm saying. Like, it doesn't have to be a certain number. It could be whatever you like.
Yeah. Man, it's hard to, because they don't have like ownership projections for the picks.
Yeah.
So it's hard to define what contrarian would be. And I would assume stuff that's like 75% or better is going to grab some traction.
Absolutely.
But maybe stuff that's a little bit more flimsy. So like Tobias Harris, we talked about, without James Harden, maybe people think throwing a blanket over PRA is a little bit safer than taking a shot on him hitting 2 threes would be a move. And we have him projected for 2.5 threes. The line over there is 1.5, which is still a top 4 probability of hitting the over. So maybe that was isolating a specific stat versus a blanket opportunity would be a move there.
Yeah, I like that.
So yeah, I go Tobias.
Do you do that a lot with the PRA where you can kind of fade the blanket, if you will? Because that's a really good example. And I imagine, especially with injuries, that comes up a bunch where you can do that.
I've more so just relied on probability than anything. Maybe as the relationship and the site grows, we can come up with an algorithm to project ownership on a pick per se, because ownership is becoming more valuable on the DFS streets to make decisions, and it would help to know what's going to be the most popular plays over there to zig while the field zags. But right now I don't have like a contrarian strategy, because I don't know what is contrarian, because I don't know the ownership of a pick.
Yeah, but I think you're onto something without obviously having the data in front of us, where you're trying to get ahead of the strategy that other people may do where it's safe. And instead of that safe, you can narrow, right, the scope a little bit, and there's a little more risk, but then you're falling back on projections, which say, hey, it might be a little bit more risk to take 1 as opposed to 3 stats, but our projections would indicate that's a pretty strong 1.
Yeah.
So I think you might be onto something. Never thought of it that way. See, that's why I asked.
Yeah, maybe. Hopefully.
Is there anything else in the final couple of minutes here? I mean, the PJ Tucker under is definitely going to ring here supreme. But, we had a couple of others in the under category. I referenced Larry Nance. You've got the PRA for Monty Morris that's popping up. And Herb Jones even sneaking in as far as an underplay. But if you do want to go to, what the public loves, everybody loves the overs. We had a couple. Dinwiddie, if the revenge theory is up in the air there. Murray, as far as assists, if you wanted to get a little specific there. DeJounte Murray's assist prop, a little bit of a gap, maybe some wiggle room there. And, depending on how you take it, you could even look at a guy like Oubre, who had a brutal night shooting, and think maybe that's just not consistent. And he would at least have the volume to kind of bounce back with a better scoring night, and also not going up against, a more difficult squad, I guess, too.
Yeah, I think out of all those, DeJounte Murray, the assist prop on the over is probably something I would lean on. I don't know that would fall contrarian, but I can see.
No. It doesn't have to be. I'm sorry, it didn't have to be contrarian.
No, right.
Like in general for you.
Right. I'm just saying. In the scope of being contrarian, that may be one of those spots where people see Trae Young and they're like, man, I don't want to take a shot at DeJounte doing this because there's two guards, blah, blah, blah. Well, DeJounte Murray has sustained a 30+% assist rate on the season, and he's averaging 8.4 assists on the season per game. So we're still getting a really, really soft line versus the static line that they posted, which was 6.5. We've got him projected for almost 8, which is still slightly below his season average per game. So that would be one that I'd probably lean on. And in this spot against the Sixers will be a pace down spot, but it's a 222 total. So I like him being involved there, and it's pretty likely that he's going to have 8+ assists, and the official probability number that we have for him is 76%. So that's still an incredible opportunity to grab a spot. And then hopefully, Field is a little less bullish because of Trae Young's existence.
Is there anything on the way out that you looked at that would be a pretty good, and again, I mean, the idea is that you build from the top to the bottom so that your 1 or 2 point play would be like a, 77% projection that we have. So you're starting up there but you did reference, anything like 60s. And a lot of times it's not so much, maybe people don't get there because they see the numbers, but they don't reason it out and say, you know what, hold on a second. There isn't much going on with Charlotte outside of Terry Rozier. So the PRA may be at 65%, but you may like that at 75 or 80% with your own conclusion. So is there anything else that maybe the average person wouldn't even get to that you think would be worth a mention? If not, that's fine. I just figured we would kind of scrape as much as we can before we get on out of here.
Man, I was hoping Josh Hart rebound line would be a little bit lower than it is, because I love watching him go after rebounds. And if we had an opportunity of no Jeremy Grant, no Nurkic, but I think 7.5 is a really hefty line. As far as something that's just like really, really popping outside of the obvious, not really. Just because the obvious is the obvious. It's so weird to kind of be negative EV when we're working with 80 and 90 percenters. No, I'm pretty chalk donkey-ish when it comes to NHA.
All good, man. Yeah, I was looking to see the one that we had that was high for Hart was assists. I thought it was rebounds, but no, it's actually higher than that. It's assists with 3.5 to nearly 5. So, and that's a 77.6. So
maybe if we wanted to get on assists from somebody that's not Hart or Anthony Simons, Justice Winslow is a guy that can be a ball handler, and we've actually seen him flirt with triple doubles in the absence of Damian Lillard this season. So we have him at a PRA line of 19.5. We actually have the under right now, but if we got some more news developing, Winslow might be I say sneaky shot at the over should he start and get the minutes, because we've seen him put together some big enough games. I guess maybe more so on the fantasy side. Maybe more so on the fantasy side. But he is somebody that can ball handle a little bit more.
Man, I wonder what the odds are on Winslow for a triple double tonight, because I might put a little sprinkle on that after.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Okay.
No, don't do it.
All right, just that's why I asked. Right?
They say if you put money on Justice, he'll keep your wins low.
Fair enough. That's all. Look, I've heard dad jokes from left to right. I've heard good. I've heard bad. That, though, is sage advice. That's all I need to hear. Right? That's fine with me. I'll never bet on Justice Winslow again after hearing that. You know that, right?
I'm with it.
All right, brother. Appreciate it as always. At Gundacker on Twitter. At Shander Show for me. Thanks to Mike for producing. Thanks to you all out there. Thumbs up, subscribe. You know the drill on your way out. And yes, we'll match your first deposit up to $50 at No House Advantage. Just put our promo code in, Stokastic. Take advantage of what we have. The lines are up there. The optimal lines are up there. Everything for you. Always a pleasure, my friend.
Yep.